Welcome to FPTV and welcome to a special edition of FPTV with somebody who's very meaningful to Titan Books, our publishing company, and a supremely well-known actress if you're into the nerd space that we serve. I will say no more. Here's Evangeline Lilly. How are you, Evangeline?
I'm fantastic. Well, I'm fantastic, and we talked about this the sort of darker side of how I was feeling this morning.
Yeah, fantastic, with a few very sensible riders that are plugged into the world in which we're living right now.
Are like wide screen, huh?
Yeah, super widescreen. Yeah. There might be times during the playback that we edit it down a bit. We are pretty widescreen because it's just you and me. Yeah. So we've got a nice view of your beautifully appointed kitchen.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was reading. I was like, maybe I should have done my dishes.
No, I can assure you that your kitchen is a lot tidier than the one here in Sumner HQ. So you're doing an excellent job with the kitchen maintenance. How are you, Evangeline?
Well, hanging in there, trying to just not be angry every day.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting time we're living right now. Mumming it up and got my kids in school, and all kinds of funny things come up with her in school. I just got a note this morning saying if your child isn't signed up to be on like any media or whatever that the school produces, then this year, because of COVID, they won't be able to be a part of the Christmas production because it'll be just a video thing. Nobody's going to attend. And I was like, what do I do with that? I've always been very protective of my kids, and we never sign the release forms for the school to use their image or their name or anything like that. But I don't want my kid not to be a part of the school Christmas play or production or whatever it is they're doing. And so I feel like it's like every day right now, I'm just constantly faced with these ethical and moral dilemmas where you really kind of have to dig into the core of what you think is right. And I feel like right now we're just at this interesting crossroads in time where our culture is shifting and changing so dramatically and quickly that we are not really sure of what's right anymore. At least I know I feel like I think I know what's right based on how I was raised, but most of it doesn't even apply anymore and I don't know. It's tricky.
I think it's the extremity of the abiding culture in the world. It is just difficult to come to terms with, and particularly if you have been raised on what's conceptually right and on care for other people and consideration and empathy for others. When you live in a world where, say, the abiding political figures do not behave like that, and in fact they behave like spoiled venal human beings with contempt for other people, and all they want to do is kind of criticize and shoot people down. That whole kind of Trump narrative where what he does is criticize, attack. And when everybody starts doing that, which is what has happened in the political arena, it's very difficult to connect to that and wonder, it's just so many awful role models for our children. I mean, my kids are young adults, but it's a difficult world to live in.
Yeah, and even I realize role models for adults, because you sort of, I think I had this conception that you reach adulthood and then you don't need role models anymore because you become the role model. But I am 41 and I still find myself deeply, desperately needing to look around me in the world and see people who are behaving in a way that I want to model myself after. And really craving and longing for that. And I have this narrative that I talk about all the time about how I wish we had elders. But it seems like we're in a culture where there's this eternal youth that must be always sacrificed to. So, wisdom is no longer the thing we aspire to in our older age, or temperance or understanding, or it's being youthful and young, but youth and youngness come with immaturity and childish behaviors, and so I'm constantly longing for that generation of elders who will be guiding and be the example, and not people who are saying, yeah, look at me, I'm still at 30 when I'm 60.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
oh man, yes, yeah, absolutely. It's such an odd thing that people embrace. It's like with physicality and whatnot. People embrace this search for youth, which means they don't look youthful. They just look strange, as they get older. Yeah, and the amount of people, female and male, who have the strength to set that to one side and go, hey, I'm just going to look like me. There's so many pressures not to be that way. And I think what you're talking about probably I think it really has its roots in the commercial discovery of the teenager in the 50s. Yeah. Because prior to that, our society did admire and respect elders and look up to elders. And lots of our elder statesmen, our politicians, our women and men were older, but once commerce, kind of finds that, okay, there's this very rich seam of teenagers and young adults, because it's all driven by commerce. And of course, capitalism is sociopathic, is psychopathic, doesn't actually care, it just wants to grow. That's where everything's become focused in our culture and our society, which is where you get celebrity culture from as well, of course. Yeah. So the whole thing has kind of been misdialed for about probably 70 years now, I think. But I think our generation is reaping that whirlwind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I wish there was more upbeat thing to say about that. But what a way to begin the interview. Yeah.
I was like, oh man, because I had all these emails I was dealing with this morning that I was feeling really angry and stressed, and I just felt like I'm just not in the right headspace to do an interview right now. And then I thought, well, just be real and just talk about what you're feeling, and just be there. And we don't have to say, yay, I'm happy all the time. Like, the truth is that I think a lot of people are struggling right now and feeling a lot of angst. And even just this tiny little conversation with you where I hear somebody saying sane things is comforting, and
of course.
it'll bring comfort to other people too.
Yeah, and I think that's right. You just have to be truthful, right? And I think the thing is, if you didn't acknowledge the fact that was scary and it was a tough time to live through, you just wouldn't be being honest. And you connect with people when you're speaking the truth, right? Everybody can see it. I think it's a very important thing. So thank you for kicking us off on that dismaying scene, which I feel every day. But I'm glad that your kids are doing it. I mean, at least while you have that dilemma with your kids, at least, you've got your kids and they're going through that wonderful time when they're at school. I mean, that's an amazing time, right?
Oh, man, I'm just so grateful they're at school. I think I'm very, very lucky. I think there's lots of places where kids aren't able to go to school right now. And it's beautiful. There's like this tiny little treasure of normacy in that.
Yes, absolutely. That's so lovely. I'd really like to start by talking about your epic children's book series, the Squickerwonkers. The first edition of that was published by our colleagues at Titan Books back in 2013 now, which is, I'm amazed that already 7 years has passed since that date. It's incredible.
I can't believe it's been as long as it has as well. It was 2011 when I first started creating them while working on The Hobbit with Johnny Fraser Allen, who works at the Weta Workshop. And he was illustrating the first of the series, and which is now titled The Pre-Show. At the time, it was just the Squickerwonkers. It was a standalone piece, but I always knew I wanted it to be a series. And so now its subtitle is The Pre-Show. And it's all very kind of theatrically based subtitles, because the story takes place in this very spooky wagon and is all on a stage with marionette puppets, which, of course, the implication with puppets is always a little bit of darkness, and it's definitely got it's a darker book. I'm a big fan of like Grimm's and Tim Burton, and I'm a big fan of Guillermo del Toro and just people who are brave enough. Edward Gorey is my favorite, but who are brave enough to challenge children with tougher, slightly darker material. I think the kids are so tuned in to what's really going on in the world, and we like to pretend that they don't know because their innocence shields them or protects them. I think they know and they notice. They just don't understand necessarily. And I think opening the door to say, well, let's explore it together so that you can understand better is wonderful.
Yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful way to look at it. What was the genesis of the series? How long had it been with you before you sat down in 2011 and thought, right, I'm going to explore it, I'm going to deliver it?
I wrote the first story when I was 14.
Yeah, that's
yeah, I was just like a real loner in school, and I loved eventually I became a bibliophile. When I hated books when I was little, but the books that did seem to get through tended to be darker, as Edward Gorey and Tolkien and Dickens, and so I used to sit around my bedroom when I was like 14 and write dark poems. And I ended up deciding one day, I was so in love with Zeus. I thought he was just incredible what he did and how he played with language and his irreverence to just say, well, if I don't have a word that rhymes, I'll make one up.
Yeah.
And I started playing with funky words. And this one word that felt really good on my tongue and kind of stuck with me was the Squickerwonkers. And I wrote a poem about this kind of unruly band of brigade, like sort of hobos that wandered around. And they were sort of gypsy-esque in nature. I think that's not the PC term anymore, but when I was a kid, when I was 14, it was, so we'll just use it for now. And they were kind of naughty, but delightful and entertaining and fun.
And it's very interesting to hear you talk about them, because you're like many authors do, of course, you're talking about them like they're real people. Not that it's a concept that I had, but they're inside your head, which of course, if you create them at that time in your life, I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
I was wondering, the darkness of it, is some of that something to do with the fact that you grew up where you did, in British Columbia, where it can really get quite sort of dark and remote in the winter time? But that's based upon my experience when I visited.
Well, believe it or not, actually, for the first 10 years, I grew up in a much darker place, which was the north of Alberta. So in the winter,
yeah.
I mean, it's really dark.
Yeah.
It's interesting because my sisters and I've got two sisters, and we're all very, very different. And my older sister really does not like the dark nature of the stories that I create. And she finds it like it grates her. She's not into that. And I do. And I sometimes wonder if it's because my big sister had a temper. And so all of her darkness came out. And so she inside felt really free and clear.
Yes. Yeah, I get that.
I was the opposite. I never, ever lost my temper. Still haven't, I just don't. I'm asked to play roles sometimes where I have to get in a row, like a really big fight with somebody, and I have to raise my voice, or I have to be assertive and yell and scream. And I always think I have no idea what that feels like or how to do that, because I've just never been that person. And so I think my darkness got pushed in, and it had to come out somewhere. And it came out in my art. And it came out of me exploring my own feelings, my sort of darker feelings and the darker side of life through something that felt more constructive to me, which, in adulthood, I now realize they're both constructive. You just have to explore it somehow. You just have to get into it somehow. But for me, it was through art. It was, I was also a drawer and a painter, and I really like dancing, and, there's all kinds of ways, but stories was the main one.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. I think I drove from something which not a lot of English people do, but I drove on business once from Alberta to Edmonton, and I was fascinated. You'll be very familiar with that journey, but I was fascinated with it because halfway through, I think for the first time in my life, I could see completely to the horizon in all four directions. To the east, west, north, and south. I'd never had that experience before, even driving across America. So there was mountains and whatnot in the distance.
Yeah. Well, imagine growing up there and then moving and spending 16 years living in Hawaii.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask you. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Well, you're not wrong. I mean, everything, I felt incredibly claustrophobic on the islands. It took me a long time. I can't say I'm even still quite used to it. I have been living back up in Canada for the last year, and just being able to look out and see, and now I'm in BC where there's tons of mountains, so you can't see like you can in Alberta, but just having some distance, some distance on the horizon where I don't feel quite so hemmed in, because psychologically the wide open plains are part of my psyche now. and they represent freedom deep, deep down inside somewhere. I feel like I know if I can see that far, that if I ever feel stuck, I can just go. I can just go wherever I need to go. On the islands, it's like,
well, you're a speck on the, there's a lot of ocean and you're a speck, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting, because I think the concept of being able to go wherever you want across that vast expanse, that also works as an analogy for creativity, right? If you sit there in that environment that you can see rolling out before you, it's like the Mickey Mouse Club, Wednesdays anything can happen day. You can just fill it all in with your imagination, right? Is what I imagine was a big spur to your creativity in creating these books.
Yeah, and also, though, I have to say, one of the things I've learned over the years of trying to take the creativity in my mind, which I think has that infusion of the expanse and just anything is possible, and concretely turn it into a communication to other people, something that has walls and parameters and limits, and that the expanse becomes a problem. Where actually being forced into some form of limitation can be really good for the creativity, because if you have every option on the table, then you can't choose anything, right? Whereas if you have 6 options, it's very easy to see clearly option number 2 is the best one, and that's where I'm going. And I think that's an interesting analogy for where we're at in our culture right now, and in life, and the anxiety that seems to be pervasive in our culture, when we have this incredible gift of freedom and choice that has been fought very hard for and won for us, and now we've had it for generations, and it's growing and growing and growing and growing, to the point where now you just never have a sense that you've made the right choice, because there's so many choices to choose from. And so as a creator, I am always grateful for some form of limitation. And I'm learning to actually apply that to my life as well. Like, as I became more successful in my career, my life choices opened up more and more and more. And eventually it reached a point where I almost started craving like the limitation of being poor again. Because at least, some of your choices are made for you, and you're not every day making these sort of really difficult choices. But yeah, so I think it's a real, art mirroring life. You don't want too much expanse, but you want just enough. You need enough for the creativity to flow, but not so much that it runs away with itself and you can't contain it.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody needs limits and discipline in order to be able to deliver anything. I think that's such an interesting point. You touched upon your career then, and of course, you've had a career for people who are in the pop culture space. You've got this kind of amazing, trifecta of things that you've been a major part of. You've been a major part of Lost. You've been a major part of The Hobbit. You've been a major part of the Marvel Universe. What does that actually feel like being? I mean, it's not just one of those things; it's 3 of them, which people rarely get the chance to do or be involved with.
It's very bizarre. I don't quite understand how that happened. I mean, I can make the rational link to, well, I was lucky enough to be on Lost, and as a result of the people who hired me on that show, putting me in that show, it's given me these other opportunities. And yet I also see how absurd it is. It seems kind of logical when you put it that way, but it's still not logical, because it just doesn't usually happen. And I don't know, pure blind luck. It's really neat though. I mean, I feel very, very grateful, because I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram numbers.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I'm a 1. And
right.
So I have this very intense need to leave a positive mark in the world. And that feels like an impossible thing to do. And it feels like at one point in time, it might have been a little bit easier when you didn't get lost in the noise. Yeah. But right now it's like, there's so much noise. How do you cut through all the noise with anything of meaning? And so despite myself, somehow the universe has made a way for me to be a part of 3 really meaningful, enormous, beautiful things that have left a mark. And so whenever I start doubting myself and feeling like, what have I done with my time here on this earth? And have I been good enough? And have I been effective? And have I been loving? And have I put enough out into the world. And I sort of rest back on my laurels and go, it's okay. These 3 really, really cool things that I got to be a part of. And if I never get to do anything else for the rest of my life that's super cool, I've still done something kind of amazing. I feel really lucky.
Yeah, quite rightly so. And I think the great thing is when you're creative in another area and you have the success that you've had, you know, in film and on the television, but also with properties that have these incredible diehard fan bases that never go away. I think it can only be a useful thing to open doors of exposure for your work. Yeah, so I think the two things kind of feed together. I think if you produce something of value in another discipline, I think having been very successful in another area at the same time, it's like being somebody who's a great musician who's put down a few good performances on film, or a great musician writes a book or what have you. I think it's a very useful thing. And I'm sure the two things are interlinked.
I think it's a double-edged sword. So, you know, when J-Lo or Justin Timberlake try and perform in a film, how many people say, oh my God, it's J-Lo or it's Justin Timberlake, I'm gonna go watch that movie. And how many people say, stick to music, go away. We don't wanna see you in this space. This isn't what you are to us. I think there's a real balance there. At least that's been my experience. I think it provides a platform, which, like I alluded to the noise and how it's hard to cut through the noise nowadays. If you don't have a chair to stand on, but you have a beautiful piece of art to show the world, good luck. They're just not going to see it. It's very, very difficult to be heard or to be seen today, despite all of our online ways to be heard and seen. And so for me, my acting career has been this very, very, very wonderful, enormous chair that I get to stand on and say, look, I did this other thing. And so people can see it and can notice it. But also, I think there's a lot of fatigue in the writing world with actors who have moonlighted as writers for a moment because it was sort of this, you know, vanity project and haven't produced something that people were really happy about or that people thought was great. And I think it's happened so many times that people are a little bit like, oh, great, another actor with a book.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for me to sort of get through to people that actually, unfortunately, it doesn't seem that way, but this is a writer who happens to have done some movies. Like, this is what I love to do. This is what I've done all my life. And acting was something that sort of happened and I'm super grateful for, but it's not my first passion. That writing is my first passion, and that I'm serious about it. I'm not just doing it as a vanity project. I'm doing it because I love it, and I've been dreaming about these characters for over 20 years.
Yes, I mean, to amplify and explore that point a bit, you've got, I know that with Squickerwonkers, it's a whole universe that you have mapped out, and you're on to the next stage of that evolution. And now you're working with another phenomenal artist, Rodrigo Bastos Didier, right? What's your process working with him?
We have a very organic process, which is probably a detriment to the series rollout. Well, definitely a detriment to the series rollout, because I really believe that for something to be special, it has to be inspired. And in order for inspiration to be there, you can't force an artist. You have to give them space and time. And Rodrigo is dedicated to the books and the project because he feels the way I do. He wants these stories to be told. He loves them. And we're doing it both as a passion project. And so he's got his own day job, and, you know, he's got to work and find time to squeeze these books in between his work. And then we do a lot of dialoguing, or at least we did for the first couple books that we did together, where I really have held this vision in my mind for so long that I spend a lot of time communicating with him about who the characters are, how I want them to be visualized, and you know, what the personality of each different book will be, because the series is supposed to have 20 books eventually. Right now we're, I think, on book 5. And each book has its own personality and character. And so we work hand in hand, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, from storyboarding all the way to designing the finished book. And it takes us a really long time. I would say it takes about 1.5 years just for the illustration process of each book.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And could you just give the viewers here just a flavour of the books to date? I almost did it in my intro and thought I'd really rather hear you synopsize it than me. So could you just give us a flavour of each book?
Oh my God, I will try. I almost feel like I should shoot it back to you because I don't know how to, I'm so verbose. I don't know how to, the elevator pitch has never been my forte. So the series is like each book, you said, say it again.
No, just the series. And yeah, it would be good to get just a little flavor of each book. As much as you can. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first book introduces you to this band of marionette puppets who put on a show that is essentially a test of character. And this little girl walks into their wagon and participates in this show. And her character turns out to be lacking. So she's a very spoiled little girl. And this sort of kicks off the beginning of the story of how all of these characters are flawed. They all have a very significant vice. So this first character that we meet and who ends up becoming a part of the troupe of marionette puppets is Selma the Spoiled. The second book is about Lorna the Lazy, who is who is like in the audiobooks, she's dramatized. I do the voices as like a really California. And the third book is Andy the Arrogant, who's your classic sort of big beefy meathead. And then the next one is, oh, we haven't gotten there yet. I don't want to give it away.
Yeah, right.
I say that. Yeah. But basically, each of these characters in the first 10 books of the series come to an unfortunate demise. And the demise is of their own doing because of their own vice. And in the following 10 books, we're going to flip the chronology on its head. You're going to find out how they all came to be marionette puppets in the first place through their vices. And the grand loop of the series is going to really it's really all pointing to a place of teaching children that we all have darkness, and that understanding our own darkness and learning how to move through the world with that vice, but without hurting or damaging yourself or others.
Yeah.
It's an important skill to learn.
Yeah.
And it's kind of in the flavor of the old cautionary tales that we used to tell for kids, except there's just a little bit more redemption, which is very subtle, beautiful little illustration at the end of every book that suggests that really by sort of pushing their vice or making the biggest mistake they could make, that they're finally freed from it because they realize this is how I want to live. And I'm so used to right now in the world, I feel like every story that I read for children, there's a good guy and a bad guy. And the good guy is to be praised and revered, and the bad guy is to be shamed and attacked and killed. And I think there's a beautiful movement that's happening where people are moving more towards showing children empathy for people who make bad choices in stories. But in my stories, I just like the idea that there are no good guys and no bad guys. There's just a bunch of flawed people, because that's how I see the world and reality. And whenever I talk to kids about the stories, I remind them that you might have things you do that aren't great choices, and it might make you feel kind of bad inside. But just remember, mom and dad make bad choices too. And I make bad choices. We all make bad choices. And it's not making the bad choices, it's what you do with them or learning from them so that next time you don't make the same bad choice.
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing, and I think that's really what's quite beautiful about your series. And I'm glad that you actually said that rather than me, because that I didn't find I didn't find that answer too verbose, but of course it was very moving and on point. And I think I think the way you've kind of crashed the Brothers Grimm and the severity and darkness of those tales into a very modern sensibility, which is ultimately an empathic message. I think that's a very important thing to do. And I think you've done it very well so far. I can't wait to see the rest of it, and I really love Rodrigo's artwork. I think it's really complements your written word. I think you've found the right partner there. Are you going to carry on working with him throughout the series, or will you change? Is he in for good, or will you change up artists?
If I'm lucky, he's in for good. that's the plan. I sort of had a come to Jesus talk with him when we first met and got together, and I said, you know, I would ideally like the series to have one artist and not multiple artists for every book. And so I'm looking for somebody who's so passionate about telling these stories that they're in it for the long haul, because it's a long haul. 20 books is a lot of books, especially when each book takes like a year and a half to make. So I jokingly say that the children who read the Squickerwonkers in 2013, when Titan first published it, will be giving the 6th book or the 10th book or the 20th book to their children or their grandchildren with how long it takes us to make them. But in the publishing world, I mean, one of the things that we've seen over and over is that adult books are a flash in the pan compared to children's books. They come and they go, and they're popular for a moment, and then tastes sort of move and change. But kids' books seem to be timeless. If you reach children with a story that connects to them when they're a child, they're going to want to tell their children that story, and that gets passed on and carried on. And I'm still reading my children's stories that I was read when I was a kid, and that my mom was read when she was a kid. And so I keep just reminding myself not to be in a hurry to make a commercial product, but to really honor the children that are going to be reading them, and make each story as good as I can make it, and really, really try very hard to, like you said, and I'm so honored by what you said, just carefully craft the sort of modern cautionary tale. I actually sort of tongue-in-cheek use a log line for my books, which is cautionary tales for modern day brats. And it's like, it's not your old Brothers Grimm, but it is a move, it is a step towards saying, no, not everything you do is perfect. And let's look at that, because you make mistakes, and if we just pretend that you're flawless, then you're never going to grow or learn, and you're not going to be very equipped to walk through the world very well when you become an adult.
I think that's so important, and I think you're absolutely right about the renewing nature of children's literature. You know, it's, for example, Roald Dahl is more popular now than he was when he was alive, which is unthinkable because he was very popular then, but his work just lives on. And again, I think, you know, he shares something with you, which is that the voice is very direct, and you know, I think the more direct the message, particularly when it comes to matters of empathy and self-development, the truer it is for a child to absorb that, if that makes sense. You know, if I think trying to be kind of euphemistic or complex or, you know, overly reassurative isn't the way forward when people are putting their life skills together. And I think that's the combination that you've got absolutely right with your series.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's so awesome for me to hear. Thank you very much. My son is absolutely madly in love with Roald Dahl, and he's a reluctant reader. Yeah. He hates books. He hates reading. And I have pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. Just, how about this one? And I'll read them to him, because I know I'm just to say, like, this might be cool. And I've tried every author I can think of that is like outside of the box, or, you know, might appeal to his sensibility. And the two that he has just latched onto, and it's the only thing, if I say, well, you could read a Dahl book, then he's like, okay, I'll read. Or if I tell him you can read a Munch book, Robert Munch, which you might not be familiar. Do you know Robert Munch?
I must admit, I know who he is, but I haven't read very much of his work.
Okay. Well, he also writes very irreverent stories that appeal to, my son's 9, a 9-year-old boy's silly sensibility. And he's Canadian, so they're all very innocent. There's nothing dark about them at all. They're very, very polite, but they're silly and irreverent, and he loves those two.
I will absolutely check those out. Speaking of other authors, who are you reading or particularly impressed by at the moment?
Oh, who am I? Well, you know, I actually just read a nonfiction book that really connected with me by Natalie Walton, who isn't even classically really an author. She's more of a design brand manager. It's called Still, The Slow Home. And it's really a look at how we live our lives today. And the direction we want to be headed in if we hope to maintain sanity and peace and harmony in our souls and in our homes. And it just really talks about slowing down and making really intentional decisions. And right now, while there's this sort of frenetic pitch that keeps growing and growing in the world, it just felt like this balm, like this soothing balm saying, just put the noise away and like tune in and remember what's important and remember who you are and remember what's real and what's good and what's true. And it really connected. I also, for the very first time ever, what I'm doing right now with my reading is I'm reading books that have been classics for a long time that I never read.
Yeah.
So like, or classics might be the wrong term, because I used to be really into classics, modern classics, like nowadays, like Bridges Over Madison County. I just read.
Yeah.
Beautiful,
right. Such a beautiful book. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I'm now reading The English Patient, which I have never read.
Oh man, yeah, such a beautiful book.
Gorgeous. So I'm having a lot of fun with that, because I think what's sort of driven me there is, again, this influx of content has left me sort of scratching my head going, I just don't know what's worth reading or not worth reading. And I'm a working mom, so my time is very precious and I want to know I'm going to read something amazing when I pick it up. And so I've been doing that, and that's been really fun.
And they're two wonderful choices as well. I think that's a great thing to do with this unusual time that we've had over the course of this year. And I think it does absolutely reap dividends if you can carve out the time to do it.
There's kind of a deeper layer, sorry to interrupt,
but please.
There's kind of a deeper layer to it, which is really neat, is I've just recently moved, like for the first time in a long time, since almost 20 years, I've bought a home here in Canada, and I've moved my family here for temporarily. And so I've been unpacking all these old boxes that I put away. And one of them was this box of books of my great grannies. And so when I read Bridges Over Madison County, I opened up the book and it had an inscription to my great granny from one of her friends. And then it had like newspaper cutouts that she had taken from the time that the book was written, of like all the buzz in the press around the book and what people were writing about the author and about the book. And she clearly really loved it, because she had all these newspaper clippings inside and like little pieces of advertisement and stuff. And it was kind of neat. I felt like I could connect to her, and like reading her old books, knowing that she had touched them and she had read them, and that they're the books she kept.
Yes, absolutely.
It's beautiful.
No, I think that's so true. I think it's great. It's great when you have books that are signed by your relatives or have been passed on for you, and you really feel the imprint of them. Inside yourself, inside your psyche, and they're in your hand at the same time. I think that's a beautiful thing. And what's next for you in terms of your movie career? What's your next project? Is it the next Ant-Man film? Is that what you'll be doing ultimately when you start shooting again?
That's the plan right now. Yeah, the plan is to do that, but everything's up in the air, and we don't really know what the tapestry looks like moving forward. And I'm really embracing that and enjoying that, and I've just been really doubling down on being present with my kids. And I had a really, really busy year, 5 years, right up until basically 2019. And even a little bit through 2019, but 2018, I had to put together my itinerary, working on some visa stuff, and I couldn't believe I didn't drop dead at the end of that year, which I almost did. And so it's just been wonderful to be forced to be home with my family, and I've really taken note of what it's done deep inside of me, what it's done for my kids, what it's done for my whole family, and I feel like I'm going to be taking this knowledge with me forward into the rest of my career, and remembering and keeping my priorities straight, that for me, working is working, and family is the most important thing, and people and health. And so there's a kind of beautiful silver lining to the crazy, is really making me slow down and take stock of what's important.
Yeah, amen to all of that. And I think what better place that on that very positive message than to say cheerio. So this has been Forbidden Planet TV with our special guest, one of our favourite authors and favourite actors, Evangeline Lilly. Thanks so much for spending this time with us, mate. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew. It was awesome. It was wonderful. Awesome. I hate that word.
It's very California, though. Awesome.
Oh my God, it's from Hollywood, I swear. No, the moon and the stars are awesome. This conversation was great.
I'm now expecting your beautiful Canadian kitchen, somebody to just move it away, you know, and you're there on the backlot at Disney or something. Kevin Feige's in the background, you know, what would space walk happen?
I loved every second of it.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you. Take care of yourself, and I very much look forward to the next Squickerwonkers book. I'm pleased when it's getting released, when the next one is getting released. Come and speak to us for FBTV new releases. We'd love to chat to you again. I'm saying we, like I'm the Queen or something. It's me. There's nobody else here. I mean, I'd love to speak to you again.
It sounds so much more official when you say we.
It does, doesn't it? Like there's a big machine behind me.
Yeah.
You know,
oh, yeah.
It's like the Matrix. Take care of yourself, Evangeline. Have a lovely day.
Bye. Bye.